The X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X Zone Radio Show or endorsed in any manner by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, the X Zone Broadcast Network, its affiliated networks, stations, employees, or advertisers.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome to the X Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell. For the next 4 hours, I'm your host and your guide as together we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And the X Zone comes to you Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until 2 a.m. Eastern on the Talkstar Radio Network, X Zone Broadcast Network, UK High Definition Radio, Euro High Definition Radio, Star Cable, and our growing family of broadcast affiliates right across Canada, the United States, Central America, the Caribbean, South America, the Pacific Rim, Asia, India, Africa, and Europe. If you'd like to give us a call, 905-575-1222. That's area code 905-575-1222. Toll free 1-800-610-7035. Email xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, on MSN Messenger, xzoneradiotv@hotmail.com, and our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. My guest this hour is Judika Illes, and she is an independent scholar, educator, and author of several books of folklore, folkways, and mythology about the subjects of magic, the occult, divination, diverse spiritual traditions, witchcraft, and the paranormal. Judika is a graduate of the Rutgers University and has a certification in therapeutic aromatherapy from the Australasian College of Herbal Studies. Now, her books include the Element Encyclopedia of 5,000 Spells, the Element Encyclopedia of Witchcraft, the Encyclopedia of Spirits, the Weiser Field Guide to Witches, and also the Weiser Field Guide to the Paranormal, which was published under Judith Joyce. Now, her newest book, Exonation, which is bound and guaranteed to be another bestseller, is the Encyclopedia of Mystics, Saints, and Sages, and it will be available this month, October 2011. Joining me now from her home in New Jersey is Judika Illes. And Judika, welcome back to the X Zone.
Thank you for having me, Rob. I love being here.
We love having you here, Judika. Tell me a little bit about your new book, The Encyclopedia of Mystics, Saints, and Sages.
It is a catalog of saints from different spiritual traditions. You know, the popular Christian saints like St. Lucy and St. Anthony. But also, a lot of people are not familiar that the phenomenon of saints is actually fairly universal. The true definition of a saint, a lot of people use the word saint to mean a good person. You know, oh, you know, my old grandma, she's a saint. But the true definition of a saint is a person who is no longer living, but doesn't depart entirely. Instead, they remain in touch with the living to do good things for us. They are, you know, there are all these horror movies about scary ghosts and terrible creatures from beyond the pale. But the saints are the benevolent dead, the powerful and helpful who, because they were once living, really do sympathize with people and comprehend the needs of people. Honestly, this book derives from my earlier book, the Encyclopedia of Spirits. That book was originally going to include saints and angels, but it got too big. It became impossible to bind. We had a 4,000-page manuscript.
Holy cow.
Yeah, I mean, we couldn't, you know, you would have had to have we would have had to sell it with a cart to drag it around.
Judika, stand by, dear. You and I have to take our 2-minute commercial break. Always great having you with us. Exonation.
Thank you.
Our guest this hour is Judika Illes. We're talking about her new book, The Encyclopedia of Mystics, Saints, and Sages. Her website is www.judikailles.com. That's JudikaIlles.com. And Judika and I will be back on the other side of this commercial break as the X Zone continues from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My name is Rob McConnell. Don't go away. Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X Zone radio show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X Zone broadcast network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. And welcome back, everyone. My guest this hour is Judika Illes. We're talking about her new book, The Encyclopedia of Mystics, Saints, and Sages. And what does it take for someone to be a saint? I mean, besides the fact that they have to be dead.
They have to produce miracles for the living. That is the key. They have to produce miracles. It's very interesting because the one religious tradition that has a bureaucracy, a technical way of establishing who is a saint is Christianity. Buddhist saints and Jewish saints and Sufi saints just sort of arise, and when they stop performing miracles, they fade into memory. But there is a canonization process in the Roman Catholic Church, and the equivalent in the Orthodox Church is known as glorification. And it's so interesting because, and I do track this in the book, the rules of becoming a saint have changed over the centuries. But the one thing that remains required is verification that 2 miracles have been produced. If they're not producing miracles, they're not saints. You know, they may be extraordinarily good people who did wonderful things while they were alive. But in order to be a saint, and in fact, some saints were not so wonderful and ethical while they were alive, but they're making up for it in the afterlife.
Give us some examples of that, because I thought that a person who was a saint had to be a good person while they were alive, or is it, or can they just be miserable sots? But bang, 2 miracles, I'm a saint.
There are a lot of saints were genuinely very good, caring people. You know, there is a folk saint, for instance, in a very popular folk saint from Tijuana. And his veneration. And saints are not worshipped. They're not gods. They're venerated, which means they're loved. They're loved and they're respected. And in many cases, they're believed to be intercessors. They may or may not actually be producing the miracle. They may just have access to God and be essentially your advocate in heaven. That's how a lot of people perceive it. But there is a saint in the borderlands, California. His name is Juan Soldado, which is the Mexican equivalent of G.I. Joe, and he is a convicted murderer.
Wait a sec, hold on here.
Yeah.
A convicted murderer is a saint.
He is a very controversial folk saint. He is not an official saint. In other words, he is not canonized, although I suspect a lot of his devotees may not know he is not an official saint. He will never be canonized because he certainly he does not fall into church guidelines.
Right.
There is some question as to whether he was guilty of the crime for which he was convicted. And there are devotees, a child who was assaulted and murdered, and her family certainly thinks he was guilty and had her body exhumed from the cemetery in which he was buried when it became a shrine. They were so offended by this. He's very popular. People testify that he performs miracles for them, healing and immigration issues. And there are people who are convinced that he was railroaded, that he took the fall for his military superiors. And, there are also people who don't care. They don't really care who he was while he was alive. What's important to them is, he's expiating or what he's doing in heaven, what he's doing or wherever he is.
How do we know that he's doing anything?
I guess, the only way to know is to take other people's word for it. And the example, there's a shrine in Canada. There's the shrine of Saint Anne de Beaupré.
Sure, near just past Quebec City. I've been
exactly,
there. Yeah.
And it is filled with testimonial plaques.
Yeah, just like the St. Joseph's Oratory is.
Yeah. Exactly. Crutches.
But I often wonder if that is the power of positive thinking, which is a big part of any belief ritual.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah, possibly, and possibly some of them are. And possibly, you could, I guess you could argue that if the saint enables you, your thoughts to be powerful enough to perform your own healing, then that is a form of a miracle.
But let me ask you this. When it comes to these miracles, they have all seemed to stop ever since technology and medical knowledge has
No. Oh no, people are receiving miracles all the time. I mean, I can attest.
Okay.
I had a scary thing with my mother, and I prayed, and you can't prove it.
No, hold on. I wasn't talking about individuals here. I was talking about the miracles at these massive shrines. I haven't heard of any miracles.
No, I mean, you have all these Marian apparitions. What are people seeing?
It's what they're smoking that worries me.
It's hard to say you can't. You are out of the realm. And you're right. You're out of the realm of scientific proof. You cannot, by definition, a miracle is an odd, unique thing that can't just be replicated at will because, that it's not a miracle anymore. But, the other side of the story are shrines all over the world full of people, newspapers full of testimonials to St. Jude.
Yeah.
Are they all wrong?
Well,
and, even if it's only the placebo effect.
Yeah.
But if
why?
the placebo helps, that's a good thing.
Well, sure, I agree with you 100%, and I certainly meant no disrespect to you when I was talking.
You can't, and it's I think a difficult thing for a lot of people because it is out of the realm of proof.
Well, you see, another question I have is that if these miracles are divine, and I'm not saying they're not because I don't know.
Right.
My question is, why is it not feasible then that whatever this divine power is doesn't go into hospitals where people are dying of cancer, children are born deformed?
Right.
And why doesn't a hand from heaven come down and just put its hand over the hospital and cure everyone?
Right. And that is, and I actually I do address that in the book. Why do some people receive a miracle and others don't?
Exactly. And is there any logic behind it?
I don't know if logic is the right word. There are, and it is basically what this book is about. The gist of the book is finding saints that will notice you, finding the right saint for you, the ones that will have an obligation toward you. And and first of all, you have to, the bottom line is that you have to acknowledge with this that there's the possibility of contact between the living and the dead. But
doesn't that go against the Ten Commandments?
Because saints are very interesting because they actually cut out the middle person. It is why people like saints. You speak directly to the saints.
But in the Bible, isn't there something about praying to idols as being wrong, and yet you go into a Roman Catholic church and there's so many idols with candles in front of them, you pay 25 cents.
Did you know Jewish saints and Sufi saints do not have any imagery? You just go to the grave and you ask for help.
Who's
in the same way that you would go like visit your grandmother's grave. They don't have statues, although they do have candles.
I believe that a candle is symbolic of light of lighting the way to
it's a gesture.
good. Yeah, exactly.
It's also a gesture. It's also a gesture of communication. In Buddhist shrines, you'll also have that incense, the same sort of little gesture that to try to make that connection between the living and between somebody who is no longer living in this realm. That's so interesting because that is actually one of the major. That injunction from the Ten Commandments is one of the major differences between the Roman Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church.
Yes.
Orthodox churches do not have statues. They have icons, two-dimensional icons, which are perceived not as portraits, but as portals to the realm of the saints. And they are there is only one that is three-dimensional, and it is of Archangel Michael in Greece, and I do have the story of that one. There's an exception to the rule. There's always an exception to the rule in the book. But specifically because they felt that creating a flat image was not a graven image. It's not technically graven. So, but the Roman Church did not worry about that. To some extent, and this is why I started talking about the spirits, the cult of saints in Christianity was intended to replace veneration of spirits because it's that same one-on-one communication. You find a saint that you love and who hopefully loves you back and notices you and feels for your pain, and you develop a relationship with them. And if you have that sort of relationship, often people say that they do, and I mean, it's my experience. I mean, I speak partially from my own experience and partly from what other people have told me about their own experiences. And it's something that I think that it's a topic that makes people uncomfortable for different reasons. The church doesn't particularly like the paranormal aspects of sainthood.
But yet, theology is based on the paranormal.
Oh, yeah.
You can't have it both ways, gang.
Exactly. Saints are often, if you look at a lot of saint books, and I've spent the last couple of years reading them, they're very cleaned up and sanitized, and the saints are presented as role models, because I think that is something that makes people more comfortable. A role model is something that is easily digestible, as opposed to that paranormal aspect of, somebody who walked this earth but no longer does in a human form, and yet helps us.
Yeah. Judika, stand by. We've got to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. Judika Illes is our special guest. www.judikailles.com, the name of her new book, The Encyclopedia of Mystics, Saints, and Sages. We'll be back on the other side of this news break. My name is Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. Don't go away.
This is the X Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Judika Illes is my special guest this hour. Explanation. We're talking about Judika's new book entitled The Encyclopedia of Mystics, Saints, and Sages. It's published by the good people at HarperCollins. It is due out this month, October 2011. And her website is www.judikailles.com. That's www.judikailles.com. Don't forget, this coming February 2012, I'm going to be the Master of Ceremonies at the Body, Soul, Spirit Expo being held at the International Centre in Toronto, 6900 Airport Road. For more information, visit their website at www.bodysoulspiritexpo.com. Welcome back, Judika. Always great having you with us here in the X Zone. We're talking about saints and basically how religious theologies and philosophies poo-poo the paranormal, and yet they're based on the paranormal.
Of course.
It makes no sense to me.
There was, I think, maybe it was the BBC or a British paper.
Mm-hmm.
They did a survey about a year or two ago on the most popular alien, and they counted down top 20, and number one was God.
Yeah. I've often said that Jesus was a space cadet. Because when you look at, and I didn't mean that in a negative connotation.
No.
Well,
I mean, it's not meant disrespectfully.
When you look at Greek mythology, and several thousand years later, along comes Christianity. The parallels are too great to ignore.
Elijah the prophet, who is venerated, and non-Christians often don't like the word saint, and that's another issue. But
right.
He is venerated by Jews and by Lutherans, and in the spiritual churches of New Orleans, and also a Saint Elijah, Saint Elias in the Orthodox Church. If you read your Bible, he goes up to heaven in a chariot. They didn't have spaceships.
Not that we know of.
The people they may not have had our type of technology. But
right.
If you translate the technology of their time to the technology of our time, it's very similar.
It is.
Yeah.
It is, but people don't want to actually look at that, and of course they don't want to acknowledge that, because if they acknowledge that, one cancels out the other.
I've been very frustrated because I like old images, and I have a fondness for dragons.
Yes.
And I like them.
Yeah.
And I like images of them. And a lot of saints are associated with dragons, most famously Saint Martha. This is Martha of Bethany from the Bible.
Is she any relation to Saint Martha of Stewart?
Well, Martha Stewart, I don't know if she can have a dragon too, a dragon on a leash. I think she has chow-chows. But, they're all legends of Martha taming a dragon. And a lot of old holy cards, if you go online and look for vintage holy cards, you will see images of Martha with a dragon. New sellers, new producers of cards don't sell these anymore. They do images of her, of the stories from the Bible, where we show her, the wonderful housewife from the New Testament, because I guess dragons are not perceived as acceptable anymore. And I find this so frustrating, because so many of the stories, and I mean that in a respectful term.
Yes.
People sometimes use story to imply that something isn't true, and I'm not implying that. But so many of these stories involve a leap of faith, that things that are out of the ordinary can happen and can exist. And so why not a dragon?
Yeah, why not a dragon?
Why not? Why not?
Exactly.
If we are asked to believe that Lazarus could be revived after 4 days, why couldn't there be an odd case of Martha finding a dragon in France? Why do we have to eliminate these images?
And how could they not exist with every culture in the world has a reference to a dragon in it somewhere in antiquity?
I mean, even if you are looking at it as a metaphor or spiritually, why eliminate the image? It's very interesting.
Yeah. What are they trying to hide?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's very interesting if you look at the evolution of religious imagery. A lot is very cleaned up these days. It's very sanitized.
Well, a lot of people say that it was the perception of the artist and what the artist's beliefs were that were incorporated into the masterpiece that had nothing to do with the actual events.
And yet there are all kinds of legends
Yeah.
of saints taming dragons and other kinds of creatures. In saints in the historical era, I mean, you could argue that St. Martha didn't exist, for instance. That's going back a long time. But there are all sorts of stories. I wrote the Weiser Field Guide to the Paranormal right before I wrote this book. And, you know, some of the best stories of paranormal abilities involve saints. Levitation and bilocation and clairvoyance. They're great stories. And they are, many of them are within living memory. And yet it's very interesting that people will separate them. They don't often turn up in books on the paranormal. People are uncomfortable.
And when it comes to theology, people will accept what they want to accept.
Yes. People will believe what they want to
Exactly.
believe. That's true with everything.
For example, when we look at Noah's Ark, we know that there wasn't every animal on his ark 2 by 2 from this beautiful planet of ours. Come on. If anything, you see, if I were to rewrite the Bible, and I've given it some thought, I would have Noah's Ark as the first chapter.
Yeah.
You see, in my book, Noah is a space traveler. The Ark is a spaceship. The animals 2 by 2 is DNA.
Yeah, I was just thinking of that too, the DNA samples.
You know, there you go.
Absolutely.
There you go. So let's, and I think this is what's happening with religion, and this is why religion is faltering today, because religion has not kept up with the times.
Right. I think so too.
I realize I'm going to hell when I die for just saying that, but what the heck, I'll take my chances. That's where all my friends will be.
Exactly. There is a great story, and apparently a true story. This is written down by monks of an indigenous chief who was being burned at the stake. I believe in Mexico or in someplace in what is now Latin America, and they were, you know, at the last minute they wanted him to convert because if you convert, you know, we're gonna burn you anyway.
Yeah.
But you will go to heaven. And he asked, well, you know, will my family be in heaven? Oh no, they, you know, they haven't converted. They're not going. And he goes, well, will you be in heaven? I said, oh, yes. He goes, okay, I'll go to the other place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, wouldn't you want to be with the people you love?
Of course.
Wherever it is.
Of course. Why would I want to be with people that don't give a hoot about me?
Exactly.
Yeah. Besides, I'm allergic to feathers. Tell me a little bit about some of the sages that you've written about.
The sages, you know, that kind of gets into the word saint. The phenomenon of people, you know, returning in dreams. Saints often make appearances in dreams to people, visions and dreams. That's the most common way that saints communicate with people. It exists in all sorts of religions, Zoroastrians and Hindus and Buddhists, but the word saint really raises people's hackles if they're not Christian, because they assume, as you pointed out, that there'll be statues and they'll be worshipped. People misinterpret Christian veneration of saints for worship, and so they prefer words like sages. Sages are, in some traditions, in Buddhist traditions and Jewish traditions, often the people who become saints, not exclusively, were people who were real scholars, Sufi traditions also, tremendous religious scholars in life. And they cared for people, they cared about people and tried to help people while they were alive. In the case of the Bodhisattvas, and that is a Buddhist concept. The Bodhisattvas, you know, they have the concept of reincarnation, and you keep coming back until you get it right. But the Bodhisattvas, once they get it right, they have a chance to stop incarnating, but they refuse. They refuse to leave because there are still people suffering. And so they make a sacred vow, Kuan Yin being the most famous. They make a sacred vow to remain in touch with people, to help them until everybody can, you know, it's like we're all going together. When all of you have perfected yourself and no one is suffering anymore, I'll go with you.
Man, I'm going to be here a hell of a long time. I sometimes think I'm Australian because I have the boomerang effect.
I was very happy that you say Australia, because this book has saints from every inhabited continent. And I always feel in my books that Australia gets like the raw end of the deal.
What?
I don't have enough Australian spells. I don't have enough Australian spirits.
Mm-hmm.
Saint Mary MacKillop, just canonized very recently, from Australia, Australia's first saint.
Really?
And a very important saint for our times, I think, because in her lifetime,
Yes.
and she did not live long ago, she was notified. She was a nun. She was a teaching nun, and she was notified that there were priests who were molesting children.
Oh, there's a news flash.
She took it seriously, though.
Good. I'm glad she did.
She went and she complained to the bishop. And it's an interesting story because the priest in question was transferred, but she ended up excommunicated.
Oh, that's crazy.
Briefly.
I think that priest should have been thrown in jail, and she should have
he was
received
sent back
a mail.
to Ireland, and they didn't tell them in Ireland why he was sent back. They said he had a drinking problem.
My gosh.
Yeah, and Mary MacKillop was briefly his friends. He had a vendetta against her. She ended up. The bishop on his deathbed reinstated her, and she was brought back into the church. But she was essentially thrown out. With no money, no nothing, no house.
For God's sake.
No one could speak with her, and she has become sort of unofficially the saint of people who feel abandoned by the church, or people who feel betrayed by the church. Mary MacKillop is sort of the extra factor. She is the person who, the saint, who is the exception to the rule.
Whenever I hear of a child being molested by a member of the clergy, that hymn comes to mind, "Suffer little children to come on to me," but I don't think that's what Christ had in mind.
No,
with
I don't think so.
No, I think that
that's
a whole new show. That's a whole new show.
If there's a hell, there's a special place in hell for certain people.
Exactly. Who in your book is saint number one?
For me?
Yeah.
Oh boy, it's hard. I write these big books because I love a lot of them. Mm-hmm. But Joan of Arc is very close to my heart. Joan of Arc is the two entries that I wrote them, but I can't read them without crying even now. Is Joan of Arc and Father Michael Judge, who is still an unofficial saint. He was the first victim of 9/11. He wasn't technically the first victim, but he was the first identified person who died, and so he was body bag number one. And he has been performing miracles for people, especially involving prenatal healing of children. And I live right outside New York City, and that was I watched that day, so that's very personal to me. That was a very, very personal thing to me. And Michael Judge was just a wonderful person in life, and he was taken from us too soon. And I'd like to think that he's up there watching over us.
Who knows?
Who knows?
Who knows? So let's see. What is the feedback that you're getting from people who've had the opportunity of reading the galleys?
It is officially released today.
Oh, it is?
Today is the official release.
Wow.
So actually a lot of people have not seen it yet. I am curious to see what the reactions will be. It is not a conventional saint book in that it does not represent it represents a phenomenon of sainthood rather than a specific religious outlook.
I like that.
I write very honestly about them also. I think it is better for us to understand them as people are flawed. We all have our good points and our bad points.
That's right.
So rather than to pretend that someone was, holier than everybody else since the day they were born, I don't think that helps us. If you are going to look at them as role models, it is better to see them people who really, in many cases, strove to be better, really attempted to be better people, even those. John of God is the saint of authors and publishers. So, technically he's my saint. There are saints for different professions. And John of God had this huge. He was from Spain. He was a molested child also. And he went through, he was a mercenary and he got in trouble.
Judika, let's hold it here because
Okay.
I've got to take my final break. When we come back, we'll talk more about John of God. Exonation, Judika Illes is our special guest. Her new book is, you ready? Released today. The Encyclopedia of Mystics, Saints, and Sages. My name is Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. Don't go away.
This is the X Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Exonation, Judika Illes is our special guest this hour. Her new book is released today, the Encyclopedia of Mystics, Saints, and Sages. Before we went to the break, we were talking about John of God, and
Well, John of God lived this dissolute life
Right.
until he was an adult, and he then had a visionary experience and a very, very public nervous breakdown, and spent the rest of his life attempting to be a really good person and help others. And that is something, if you don't appreciate what he went through to get there, I think it's out of reach for the rest of us. It's the humanity of the saints that makes them so special, that they suffered and they were tempted and they made mistakes. And yet, maybe even the possibility that after you die you can still attempt to make amends. So it's a nice thought.
it certainly is. What's your next book going to be about?
I don't know yet.
Oh, come on.
I think I'm taking a vacation for a little bit.
Oh, that sounds like a good idea. Where are you going to be going?
Oh, God, I don't know. I have bookstore schedules. That's not really a vacation. I would like to go to the Caribbean. That's where I'd really like to go.
Yeah, love it down there. We've gone
Yeah, me
to
too.
Jamaica. We've gone to the U.S. Virgin Islands, the Bahamas.
Yeah, the British Virgin Islands also.
Oh,
Beautiful.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Mind you, I like Jamaica, and my second favorite spot is the Dominican Republic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
beautiful.
super people. And that's what this world is about, people.
People.
And we've got to start dropping the color aspect,
Yeah.
the theological aspect, the belief aspect, and learn more about each other. So
The nice thing about saints also that people don't realize, they will do favors and bestow miracles on people who are not of their own religion. You can ask for, and it is very traditional in a lot of communities in North Africa. Muslims and Jews go to each other's shrines. It's a nice thing.
How many saints are there?
There are over 10,000 Roman Catholic
Whoa.
saints alone. So, I mean, I would be, what am I writing? I'd be happy to do book 2.
Yeah, I guess so. Judika, as always, time goes by so fast when you're with us.
Thank you, Rob.
Hey, it's my great pleasure. Let our listeners know how they can get a copy of your book and how they can find out more about you.
Books are available wherever fine books are sold, online, offline. And my website, www.judikailles.com. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter.
And you're tonight here on the X Zone.
Yes.
Judika, take care of yourself, my good friend.
You too. Thank
Keep
you.
the great work up. So long now. Judika Illes has been my guest this hour. Once again, her latest book, which is released today. It's in bookstores, online, and where you go to get your local books, right around the corner, while they're still there. The Encyclopedia of Mystics, Saints, and Sages, published by the good people at HarperCollins. Once again, her website, www.judikailles.com. I'll be back on the other side of the news at 6.5 minutes past the top of the hour as the X Zone continues with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. On MSN Messenger, xzoneradiotv@hotmail.com. And our regular mail is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. I'll be back after this news break. Don't go away.